All right, let's get right into it. We're going to talk about a small 14-pound sphere of plutonium, an object that, in just 9 months, managed to kill 2 of the world's leading physicists. It was so dangerous, so unbelievably volatile, that it earned a chilling nickname, the Demon Core.
You know, that's what the scientists at Los Alamos called it. Tickling the dragon's tail. That was the slang for their work. These were criticality experiments, basically pushing a chunk of plutonium right to the very edge of a nuclear chain reaction. It was like a high-stakes gamble with the laws of physics itself.
So, I want you to picture the scene. It's May 1946. World War II is just over. We're in a quiet little room at the top-secret Los Alamos lab. The physicist Louis Slotin, who's a total expert at this stuff, is showing his replacement and a few others how it's done. The air in that room is thick with tension. Everybody knows just how dangerous this is.
And get this, the one thing, the only thing, Slotin is using to control this immense nuclear power is a screwdriver, a plain old flathead screwdriver. That's it. That's the only thing keeping 2 halves of a beryllium sphere from closing and triggering a full-blown nuclear reaction.
And then, in a fraction of a second, it's over. The screwdriver slips. The top half of the sphere drops. The plutonium core is fully enclosed, and the room is just filled with this silent, terrifying flash of blue light. It's the signature of ionized air from a massive burst of radiation. And Slotin, he knew. Instantly, he knew he had just received a fatal dose.
So you have to be asking, how could something like this possibly happen? Well, to get that, we need to take a closer look at the man himself, Louis Slotin, and the incredibly risky experiment he was performing.
And let's be clear, Louis Slotin was no rookie, not by a long shot. This was a brilliant Canadian physicist right at the heart of the Manhattan Project. He'd worked side by side with Enrico Fermi on the world's very first nuclear reactor. He literally assembled the core for the first atomic bomb test. When it came to this kind of hands-on work, he was the guy at Los Alamos.
So what in the world was he trying to accomplish? Well, this whole experiment was about finding the exact moment that a lump of plutonium goes critical, that tipping point where it can start a self-sustaining chain reaction. He was carefully bringing these beryllium shells closer, inch by inch, nudging the core toward that point, taking measurements and then backing off.
Now, here's where the story gets even more chilling. The plutonium core Slotin was working with, it had already killed someone. Just 9 months before, his friend and fellow physicist, Harry Daghlian, died after he accidentally dropped a tungsten brick onto this exact same core. It was already a known killer.
That flash of blue light, that was the start of an invisible, silent war on Louis Slotin's body. And to really understand what happened over the next 9 days, we need to look at the brutal science behind something called acute radiation syndrome.
Acute radiation syndrome, or ARS, is what happens when a massive dose of radiation just slams into the entire body all at once. This isn't a long-term illness that develops over years. No, this is a fast, vicious, and systematic destruction of your body's most basic functions. And this visual, it really shows you the cruel trick the illness plays. First you get sick, but then comes this latent period. It's a phase where the victim can feel strangely okay, almost like they're getting better, but they're not. It's really just the quiet before the storm, before the body systems begin to fail catastrophically. So how does it do this? Well, the key thing to understand is that radiation is like a saboteur at the cellular level. It goes after the cells that are dividing the fastest, the ones constantly rebuilding our tissues, like in our gut and our bone marrow. It doesn't kill them outright, it just destroys their ability to make new cells. And that one simple fact is what causes all the horror that follows.
Just look at this. On the left, that's a healthy intestinal lining. Those stem cells are constantly making replacements. But on the right, that's what radiation does. It obliterates those stem cell factories. So as the old cells on the surface die off naturally, there's nothing to replace them. The lining is literally stripped away, which leads to massive internal bleeding, infection, and dehydration.
And while that's happening, there's another attack going on. The radiation is destroying the bone marrow, the factory that makes all of our blood cells. And you can see the result right here on this chart. The cell counts just plummet. The lymphocytes for your immune system, gone. The platelets you need to clot blood, gone. Your body is left utterly defenseless.
Okay, so now that we know the terrifying science, let's connect it back to the human story. For Louis Slotin, these syndromes weren't just a theory in a book.
They were a 9-day countdown happening inside his own body. His body followed the grim schedule almost perfectly. Right after the accident, he had that initial sickness, the vomiting. Then he entered that deceptive latent phase, feeling okay for a few days. But then, on day 6, the GI syndrome kicked in. His digestive system just shut down. By day 7, the hemopoietic syndrome took over. With no more platelets, he started bleeding internally. On day 9, his body just couldn't take it anymore.
And this is the grim proof. This isn't a diagram from a textbook. This is from Slotin's actual autopsy. It shows the total wreckage of his intestinal lining, exactly what the science said would happen. The invisible attack left behind some very, very real evidence.
But there is one last, absolutely crucial part of this story. In that split second, while he was absorbing a lethal dose of radiation, Slotin's first instinct was pure heroism. He ripped the beryllium hemispheres apart with his bare hands and then threw his body over the core, using himself as a shield for the other men in the room. An unbelievable act that saved their lives.
So, because of Slotin's incredible quick thinking, those other 7 men survived. But the accident and the demon core itself, they left a permanent mark on Los Alamos and on the entire nuclear age.
390 Roentgens. That's the estimated dose for Alvin Graves, the scientist who was standing closest to Slotin. Now, to put that in perspective, a dose of around 450 is considered lethal for about half the people who get it. So Graves' chance of survival was basically a coin flip.
And amazingly, Graves pulled through. He spent weeks in the hospital, but he did recover and went on to live for another 20 years. But the radiation never really left him. A later study suggested that all the damage his body took that day was probably a contributing factor in the heart failure that ultimately killed him.
So what happened to the demon core itself? Well, after Slotin's death, all hands-on criticality tests were banned for good. The core, now responsible for 2 horrific deaths, was supposed to be used in a nuclear bomb test, but that test got canceled. In the end, this infamous chunk of plutonium was melted down, its material repurposed, and its deadly history was finally over.
The story of the demon core is just a harrowing, unforgettable tale from the dawn of the atomic age. And it really leaves you with a tough question, one that we're still grappling with in any field of science that pushes the boundaries. What is the acceptable cost of progress?